and Minister, again, got you right there. And we have you right here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Good to see you.
it.
All right. Okay. Ooh, excuse me. Can you just pass me my purse for a second? Sorry. Yes. Sorry about that. Give me 1 minute. These are a necessity. Glasses. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Atlantic Council's Town Hall meeting. This is entitled Building a Transatlantic Agenda to Secure the Next Century. And we really have an extremely distinguished panel. And before I introduce them and just give you the format of the next hour, I do want to commend the Atlantic Council. I happen to be a board member. I'm Paula Dobriansky, but I want to commend the Atlantic Council because I really think that this spotlight in looking at the United States and Central Europe in partnership with GLOBSEC is really very timely and an opportunity, in fact, to be able to look at what are the kinds of practical recommendations that we could look at and consider going forward. So well done to the Atlantic Council, and also Ambassador Kasher is here, GLOBSEC, congratulations on that. And this particular forum this afternoon, I think, will really home in on some of these core concrete areas. As I said, we have three very distinguished speakers who we will be hearing from. We have His Excellency Péter Szijjártó, the Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. We have His Excellency Jacek Czaputowicz, who is the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs. And then we have His Excellency Aleš Chmelař, Deputy Foreign Minister, I almost made it, of the Czech Republic. I really have been practicing that one. Chmelař. The three of them are first going to address, in their estimation, what are really the most primary issues that really should be on this transatlantic agenda between the United States and Central Europe, and looking at a secure and future and next century. And at the same time, after that, after we will hear very briefly from each of them, we're going to take a moment and focus on the three areas that were covered in the report, specifically the issue of economic issues, here with a focus on energy, then to look at the issue of democratic values and politics, and then to also look at security. And then we'll go to you and we'll have a vibrant town hall discussion. So with that, Your Excellency, if I may ask you, Minister, please give us your view on what's uppermost in your mind and crucial for this agenda at this time, and welcome to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Honored to be here. It feels like being at home because there are so many Central Europeans in the room, as if we had not traveled, 9 hours. With the transatlantic agenda, we are happy that it exists, because a couple of years back we understood our region was not really on the radar screen of US foreign policy. And I have to tell you that we are happy with the changes in this regard. We're happy to be back on the radar screen, happy to be a factor from the perspective of the US foreign policy. We're happy that Central Europe is taken into consideration as a strategic location. I have to tell you that we have a very clear understanding of history. Whenever there was conflict between East and West, we Central Europeans always lost. And we don't want to be losers anymore. We would like to get out of this situation. I have to tell you that in Europe, there are serious debates going on about the future of the continent. Here you will hear three foreign ministers of three countries which are speaking in very much in the same voice, and we represent a very sovereignist approach when it comes to the necessity of strong nations to create the European Union. So when we think about making EU strong again, we think about making our nations strong as well. And this is a very important approach from our perspective, which is not shared by the mainstream in Europe. But in this regard, the US gives us a huge help. Because since your president has been elected, and since he has been saying America first, we have a good reason and the liberty to say Hungary first, Poland first, or Czech Republic first. A couple of years ago, if you had made the same way, you were considered immediately, I don't want to use those bad words, but so you would have been put parallel with the darkest dictatorships of the last century. You know, so for us, having a patriotic policy going on here in the U.S. is a help to carry out our patriotic policies in our countries as well. And one specific aspect, if you don't mind, I would like to mention, which is Christianity. We are coming from a region of the European Union where this is still taken into consideration seriously. And we're happy that in this regard, the transatlantic relationship is value-based. Since you consider Christianity as a value which must be protected, we do the same. And in this regard, we can unite our forces. So to cut it short, we are happy that the transatlantic relationship exists again, and we are happy that the administration considers Central Europe as important. We usually consider ourselves as important, but it doesn't really matter that much that the Americans consider us important. You know.
All right. Well, Minister, thank you so much. Minister Czaputowicz, please, let's hear from you.
Thank you. Let me start with the obvious remark that our countries are members of the European Union. They've been members for 15 years, and we are satisfied with our membership in this organization. However, I think we share the opinion that for our security, transatlantic relations are crucial. So we cannot provide security for our part of Europe without help and a strong bond with the United States. The threat from Russia is a very serious one, and the European Union is not strong enough to face that threat alone. So for us, and we argue within the European Union for strong transatlantic relations because we understand that it is crucial for maintaining security in the 20th next century, how it is framed in the title of this panel. So how we are doing that? First of all, of course, NATO, it is a good instrument to maintain these relations and also to increase military presence in our part of the European continent. So the decisions taken particularly at Warsaw NATO summit were very, very important to enhance military presence in Baltic states, Poland, Romania. Of course, when you look at the military might, United States is the most important partner. So apart from our relations within NATO and supporting modernization of the alliance in order to face these threats, we established very good relations. We call them strategic one, but strong relations, bilateral one with United States, particularly visit of President Andrzej Duda just a few weeks ago, and signing a bilateral agreement on increase of military presence, American military presence on our soil is very important. So this decision to invest here also in terms of military presence are very important. We understand that at this Poland, it's a bit different situation as far as Hungary is concerned, that we have to also spend enough what is expected part of the budget on the modernization of the army. So our links with the United States also are realized through buying important part of military equipment, airplanes or missile systems. And I think that in future we have to try to mobilize international community around like-minded countries, the broader West or the democratic countries, the European Union member states, the US, Canada, also Republic of Korea, Japan, Australia. We know these countries and together build a broader coalition to face contemporary challenges like Middle East, like maybe threat from China, technological advantage. So these are our natural partners, and we argue for that. Of course, already Péter mentioned that there are different opinions with the European Union. Some countries try to position United States at the same level as other superpowers like Russia, China, to maintain equal distance. For us, it is wrong policy. Transatlantic relations, our relations with the United States are of special importance. They are different than the relations with other external actors. And this is a specificity of our policy, countries of the region.
Thank you very much. And let's hear from Minister Chmelař.
Thank you very much. It's quite difficult to speak after Péter and Jacek to complement something. But I would like to start actually with the reasons why our region has a special place and a special relationship to the U.S. I would talk more also on the Czech case, but certainly there are three names that somehow emerge from the 20th century and which has forged a very close relationship between the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia then, and the U.S. Certainly, I should start by Woodrow Wilson. Czechoslovakia would not be created without his strong stand behind humanist values and behind self-determination. And I think that it is a good opportunity also to remind ourselves the 100th anniversary, not just of creation of Czechoslovakia, but also of a very clear commitment from the United States to be present on the European continent. The second name, obviously, is Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his presidency, which has meant a lot. More than half of Europe, or half of Europe, it depends on the definition, was liberated by the United States, and also part of my country, also part of Czechoslovakia. So in this respect, it is a second name which has forged a very strong, let's say, historical and emotional relationship to the United States. And of course, the last name is Ronald Reagan, because he was a symbol of defeating the Soviet Union and ending the Cold War. And he was also the first president to visit Czechoslovakia, to visit Prague in 1990 for the first anniversary of the 17th of November 1989. We have the main railway station in Prague is called after Woodrow Wilson. He has never visited that railway station, unfortunately, but Ronald Reagan has had a very strong place actually in our history as being the first president. We had then subsequently also Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush. So we had basically all the presidents actually since '89 which visited Czechoslovakia, and which has then let's say continued this relationship with us. And I think our task for us three, for us four, for us maybe seven or more in the region is to explain that the transatlantic bond is something extremely important for Europe as such, and to be able to explain to other member states of the European Union that we have to take a special care of it. And especially today when we face really clear and assertive ambitions from different countries from outside, namely, of course, everybody, ideas that pop out as, of course, China and Russia. These are common interests that we have. We also have common interest in safeguarding peace in the Middle East. And I think that overall, when we look at the situation, our goals are quite not similar. Our goals are the same. What sometimes differ, both inside the EU and in our transatlantic relationship, is the tools. But I think that if we focus on the goals and if we focus on a dialogue, and our countries are especially prone here to play a role of a moderator and of establishing this debate, we can achieve actually those goals in a common way and in a united way. The Czech Republic has taken, as of 1st of July this year, V4 presidency. So we have also taken a stance on the program of the presidency of reconciling and basically explaining, so that we know that we can also influence the overall position of the transatlantic dialogue to be strengthened, to be able to overcome the current challenges and to come stronger from the changing world in the next years and in the next century. I think it is now when we play on the future of the transatlantic bond, which is being challenged by external actors and which is being challenged by many contextual and big changes in the world. and I hope that we will be successful in the next 5 years, maybe putting some emphasis on the next Commission and European Parliament term, in order to safeguard and strengthen the transatlantic dialogue. And certainly our countries and further countries in Europe are ready to play a more active role in safeguarding this. Thank you.
Very much. Something that strikes me in the three of your opening comments that really undergirds each of your statements, you've had different emphases, but is the importance to you of the relationship with the United States, as you've mentioned in different ways. And thank you for that. And I will say that I think you're here, as I believe, certainly in an institution that also has that same very strong perspective, and hence the collaboration of the Atlantic Council with GLOBSEC in spotlighting where we are in the relationship in Central Europe. And you also highlighted the importance of the transatlantic agenda more broadly, and how we can also collaborate even beyond in other regions, which I think is noteworthy. Let us go through, if you will, some of the areas identified in the report. And I mentioned the first one I'd like to begin with is the economic. But there are lots of issues to be addressed in the economic sector. But one that's highlighted in the report is an initiative which certainly is launched by Poland, the 3 Cs initiative, along with Croatia, and which the Atlantic Council has been certainly a supporter of. But why I picked this out, the 3 Cs initiative, is because it has economic ramifications, in the sense that I think it was a spawn because of the need for energy independence and a way for looking at how does one create resources, energy resources, where a country would not be, or a set of countries would not be put or held hostage to any manipulation of energy sources. So let's discuss, starting with you, Minister Czaputowicz, the importance to you of this 3 Cs initiative. What do you see as your primary economic goals that you can work closely with the US? We just had our first LNG shipment to Poland that culminated as a result of this 3 Cs initiative. So let's start with you, and then we'll go to the other two, because I think Hungary, the Czech Republic, you're part of the 3 Cs initiative, but you've also had some other energy dealings unto your own individual countries.
Yes, thank you. When you look at the economic situation in the European Union, you can notice that our part of Europe develops quickly, so the economic growth in Poland is close to 5%. And indeed, we contribute together to the development of the European Union, to the growing role of that organization and in the world. So we are proud of that we are the engine of the economic development within the European Union. I think that our vision also refers to this competition between companies which contribute to economic growth, as opposed to the vision of protectionist European Union, even within the European Union. So we argue with other countries what is the vision of the European Union, but we prove that you can simply develop properly. As far as the 3 Cs initiative is concerned, a very important organization, or maybe less, maybe an initiative, let's call it that way, set up by Poland and Croatia a few years ago. The main aim is to develop infrastructure in the region. Our part of Europe, the one we joined the EU 15 years ago, is simply less developed. The links between north and south in our part are weaker than between east and west, and much less developed network of connections. We use the word interconnectivity. Roads, railways, but also pipelines are crucial. So in order to catch up with the level of development, we have to invest in infrastructure. Our relations between our countries are not so, also social one, not so strong due to the lack of proper infrastructure. So this is a main goal. The countries the members of the European Union belong to that organizations. And of course, one of these aspects is energy security. We are very critical of the projects aiming at developing further pipelines in order to import gas from Russia, so Nord Stream 2 particularly. Yeah, because we think that that we are dependent on Russia. We don't want to be dependent on other issues, and then we provide financial resources which Russia turns into military might and threatens neighborhood, Ukraine and so on. Particularly Ukraine is very much afraid of what will happen after the project will be realized. So in order to diversify, it is important for us. Poland invests in the Baltic pipeline to import gas from Norway through Denmark, and LNG terminals to buy liquid gas on the market, particularly from the United States. And we see here common interest with the United States. And so it is be very good as you look at that from economic side. So it will be a competition, so you will have different possibilities. But also security aspect is very important. So these days we have to simply build interconnectors between our countries in order to be able to send gas from Poland, Baltic Sea, further to the north, and then Russia will lose its leverage, so to say, because they use, of course, resources as an instrument in geopolitical place. So it's simple. So this is an organization. Now we have to institutionalize. Now we created a fund from which we will finance the development of the infrastructure. And I think it's going well. I mean, this institutionalization, and now we have to simply create good projects and invest in them and finalize them.
To the Czech Deputy Foreign Minister, give your view on this. What do you see as your priorities? How does Russia fit into that equation? And also, do you plan to invest in the fund that's been established in the 3 Cs?
Well, 3 Cs initiative is an initiative in which we were from the beginning, and we are glad that this is happening. Certainly north-south connections is a thing that is infrastructure in general on this direction is undervalued or under its potential. That is very clear, and we are ready to also be part of it. In terms of financial decisions, not much has been decided yet. There are different types of contributions that can be made. I mean, either and we are now in our development banks are in a discussion to grant some financial, let's say, capital in order to increase the leverage and to have a bigger investment potential. But this is still being discussed. But what I wanted to underline here, especially on the energy dimension of the 3 Cs initiative, is that every single economy, and not just economy but also politics, depend on energy and on its affordability, which is an obvious thing. But what is an implication sometimes that if you have energy which is not cheap, which is expensive, then you are also more prone to protectionism and to closing on yourself, because energy is a price element of every single product of your economy. Even services are influenced by the energy levels by the price levels of energy. So in this respect, I think there is a certain equation in terms of guaranteeing affordable energy in Europe, and also guaranteeing that Europe will be a free trade promoter worldwide, which we try to do, but there are hurdles, new hurdles, which we have to face. And energy prices, let us be honest, is also one of them. It's difficult to compete worldwide if energy prices are exorbitant. So in this respect, it is something that we very much pay attention to, on energy affordability. And of course, and this is to be taken into account very seriously, is energy diversification, which sometimes can be on the short term taken as probably increasing the energy of prices, but in the overall long-term cycle it diminishes the risks on the price fluctuation. So in this respect, it is something that is an investment that is a rational one. It is not just security-led, it is also economics-led. And in this respect, we are very much open to every initiative which could create diversification in our region, in the European region per se. Since 2009 and since the gas crisis between Ukraine and Russia, we made a huge infrastructural effort, especially in the Czech Republic. So we are ready to, I wouldn't say everything, but we are ready to a lot of further changes, and to the interconnectedness and the reverse flows are on a completely different level than 10 years ago today. So the Czech Republic is ready for diversification. Of course, we consider the price level, and whatever can decrease the prices or lead to more diversification will come from our side in this respect. So I very much hope that the initiatives that we have there, the financing of it, and also the burden sharing will be done in a way that profits basically everybody, will decrease the prices or increase the diversification.
And how about Hungary in this regard? I know that Hungary has had some of its own path. You've had some engagement with Russia, which is separate from Nord Stream 2. But at the same time, you're also in the 3Cs initiative. And do you intend to invest in the fund? Give us where you are at this time and how you see the US fitting in this picture.
Whenever we speak about energy issues in Europe, there's a big elephant in the room. And the name of the elephant is hypocrisy and political correctness. Because what goes on in Europe is the following. The Western Europeans bash Russia like hell above the surface, and under the surface they make enormous businesses with the Russians. Look at the figures, they help. During the last 2 years, France has increased its trade with Russia by 45%. Germany has increased its trade with Russia by 29%. And look at all Western Europeans, they all increase their trade with Russia. And we, poor Hungarians in Central Europe, who are usually portrayed as, you know, being too close to Russia, we lost $8 billion of export opportunities since the sanctions against Russia have been in place. This is number one. Number two, when it comes to energy, especially gas, I'm responsible for in the international energy negotiations as well. Currently, we buy 100% of our imported gas from Russia. But do we do it for fun? No. Then why do we do it? Because this is the reality. This is what infrastructure dictates. We can only buy gas from Russia, period. And whoever speaks about the necessity of getting rid of the Russian influence has never showed up in Budapest saying that, okay, I have this amount of money to invest here in your infrastructure in order to enable you to make the diversification. So we can speak about, you know, getting rid of the Russian gas, but until there's no one to invest in that, it's only blah blah. And I can tell you that there are 4 allies of ours on whom it depends whether we can diversify our energy resources or not. 4 allies: United States, Romania, Croatia, and Austria. So it's 4 of you. Why? Because in Romania, there's a big offshore gas field where ExxonMobil from United States and OMV from Austria owns the right to exploit. Have they made their final investment decision? No. Do we have the infrastructure? Yes. So what is missing? An American-Austrian decision to exploit gas and then deliver it to Hungary. All physical preconditions have been completed. Of course, the American and the Austrian companies, you know, they are not happy with the Romanian regulation. They complain always on that. So it's 3 allies of ours. And then the 4th, Croatia, is supposed to build an LNG port in Croatia from which we could buy gas. Infrastructure is given. The pipeline is there. But it's still not completed. So it's, I understand it's very easy for the mainstream here in America and in Western Europe to portray Hungary as, you know, Russian spies. But the thing is that it's up to Western Europe, up to you, and up to our allies whether we can get rid of this influence. And so far, nobody proved to be too helpful in this regard. And if you look at the amount of gas sold to Germany on an annual basis from Russia, you will understand the reason.
Do you think you'll invest in the 3Cs initiative
Well,
being
we are
part
we
of
are
that?
we are members of Free Seas Initiative from the very beginning. Since you might remember that the first meeting of that took place in New York in 2015, as far as I remember, on the margins of the General Assembly. I represented Hungary there, so I was there, and if it makes sense, we definitely invest. If we see that there is a positive outcome, there's a deliverable, then we definitely invest, no question.
One thing that I see of three of you had different comments, but if I could identify, I think a common strand, at least I'm going to take away from this, is I think that all three of you are vested in the concept of diversification, and of course look at the importance of how energy is a crucial area economically, and I think it's well, as I said, well addressed in the context of this report. Let's go to another area, and that's identified. The second area in the report concerns democratic values and politics. And I will begin with you. You mentioned you mentioned values you mentioned values in your own opening comments, which I took note of when you mentioned the importance of Christianity. And here, all three of you, by the way, have been challenged by the EU at some point or another. The report itself discusses the issues of judicial independence, media reform. I guess my question to you is, looking at a common agenda and how we can collaborate, give us your thoughts on that. That's what we'd really like to hear. From where you're sitting, how you'd like this agenda to be expanded with the United States.
Well, look, I don't think I have to explain here too lengthily, but if you go against the mainstream, you're gonna be attacked by basically everybody who represents the mainstream. And here you have three countries represented which definitely go against the mainstream, and maybe you know a president who does the same, right? And in this regard, I have to tell you that Hungary is often portrayed as an authoritarian, almost dictatorship, you know? Why? Because there's a big majority in the parliament, 2/3 owned by one party. But you know what? We didn't win it on lottery. We won it on free and fair and democratic elections. That was the will of the people. So whenever we are under attack by European Union because of going against the mainstream, I always ask them, please respect the will of the Hungarian people. Because you might not like the way Hungarian people decided, but that's the decision of the Hungarians, and you must respect that. This is democracy, number one. Number two, when it comes to values, well, I cannot. I can give you a long list of values in which we definitely go against mainstream. First of all, our constitution starts with the word God. Our constitution acknowledges the role of Christianity in preserving our nation for such a long time. We are proud to be a Christian country for the last 1019 years. In our constitution, it is being said that marriage can be made between one man and one woman. Our policy is pretty much based on families. We believe in a classical type of families, and we give tax exemption, significant ones, to the families based on the number of kids. And if a woman gives birth to 4 or more children, then she is exempt from paying personal income tax for her entire life. So just to give you a couple ideas which are absolutely not understood by mainstream, which are absolutely not understood by the liberal approach, which are absolutely taken into consideration as something retrograde by the Western Europeans. So when we are attacked with these kind of mottos, you know, of freedom of speech, judiciary, media, whatever, these are all perceptions. And when I sit towards the colleagues and when they raise such kind of issues, I always ask them for one thing. Give me one concrete example. Because until we discuss about perceptions, it doesn't make sense. It's deaf and dumb, you know? Give me one concrete example. And then usually conversation ends because there are no concrete examples. You know, so it's very easy to bash countries which have done a lot in order to be part of the solution instead of being part of the problem. It's very easy to bash countries where there's political stability. Maybe it's envied, okay? But you know, sometimes we really feel that these are insults, you know, because these insult our countries. So if you don't consider our people to be mature enough to make a decision about their own future on their own, it's a problem, because many times during our history, Hungarian peoples were about to be protected by themselves by someone else, and then it ended in a very bad conclusion. So what I can tell you, that you should consider Central Europeans mature enough, and believe me, in Hungary, we had to fight for our freedom so many times during our history. This is another value which connects us, Americans and Hungarian Central. We had to fight for freedom. And believe me, that a government which would violate any rights of the Hungarians would not be elected free continuous elections with a 2/3 majority. So please respect and value the mindset of the Hungarian people and their ability to make a decision about their own future.
All right. Minister?
When we are talking about transatlantic relations, and there is a question, is this criticisms concerning some deficiencies of democratic system an obstacle or not? I would start with the remark that indeed in the European Union this issue is raised. People in some countries say that system in the United States is becoming not democratic, that Donald Trump does not represent these liberal values, that there is a threat to democracy, there is a mood anti-immigrants. There is also kind of a turn from the values we share within the European Union, which is multilateralism. So when I would like to answer that question or face that problem, I would say that we see it immediately from the discussion that it's a problem with the United States. But we do not share that opinion. As some West European countries, we would like to distance themselves from the United States. We think that there is a democratic process in the United States which resulted in the election of the president and the governmental infrastructure, or so to say bodies. So we have to accept, and we have to accept sovereignty of the countries. As far as criticisms of our countries is concerned, it is not so much deep in the sense that there are some rules within the European Union, and there are some institutions responsible for the preservation of rule of law. These are the Court of Justice, European Court of Justice, and these are also, there is a council which decides about that threat to the rule of law. And for the moment, I do not know about any cases that the rulings of the Court of Justice were not implemented. As far as Poland is concerned, everything was implemented. We have to reverse, change some parts of our reform, even we think we were right. Therefore, there is no real, so to say, problem with that. As far as criticism of the Commission is concerned, of course, Commission has not the power to say about European standards. The Commission may address the issue to the Court of Justice or to the Council. For the moment, the Commission did not convince the states, which are members of the countries, that there is any problem. We know within the European Union about that there are no evidences of the threat or serious threat, how it is in the treaty, to the rule of law in our countries. Therefore, we can coexist and cooperate within the European Union. It is rather a political process. It is an instrument very easily employed to blame a country in order to get political aims. Particularly, it was visible before the election to the European Parliament that some commissioner or commissioners criticized our state or Hungary in order to get political support, but it's a political process. So we have to live with that, but do not treat it as a kind of a objective truth. It is not like that. So we are rather confident that democratic system develops properly in our part of Europe.
Thank you very much. I mean, first, just a small fact check: the Czech Republic has not been challenged either formally or informally by the European Commission or any other institutions in terms of rule of law. And to my knowledge, there is no procedure that is to be opened. Nevertheless, this does not mean that we do not stand in solidarity with Hungary and Poland on this issue, because what we understand is that maybe the basic reason for this friction between some countries and the overall interpretation of the values as enshrined in Article 2 of the treaties of the European Union is basically, I believe, a lack of trust more than a lack of concrete mechanism inside the judicial or other procedures. There was a very interesting analysis done by the Polish government, one of very interesting analysis done in terms of rule of law, showing that the elements of the Polish reform actually do exist in different member states, individually dispersed. This is basically the truth, and it is very obvious way to say that this is not about the technical provisions, but it is about a certain suspicion that these changes might lead to some putting in question of the rule of law of the judicial system and as others. So in my view, this is a lack of trust rather than some technical issues, and we need to really spend time in order to increase this trust, and the Czech Republic, I think, tries to be also a certain moderator and enhancer of the dialogue in this, and we hope that this could be finished in a good way. On the overall value system, I think it is incredibly important to still restate the old slogan, the old motto of the European Union, which is always, not always, but often forgotten in the past times, that it's united in diversity. I think that in fact, in letter and both in fact, we share the values of Article 2 of the treaties, but there are nuances that we need to feel quite strongly in terms of diversity. Our constitutions doesn't start with the word God, it starts with we the people, which is the same as for America. We have maybe in our tradition a more Aristotelian approach. Sometimes we are called falsely as the most atheist country in the world. It is not true, but it is true that we have a certain nuance also compared to other countries to the West in terms of how we understand a certain aspect of rationality. That is the reason why, for example, the Visegrad presidency of the Czech Republic has as its motto reasonable Europe, that we need to really put emotions aside and need to sit actually on the facts of cooperation and on the need of it. And this concerns not just the EU on the inside, but also we have to base on rational dialogue also the relations between the US and the EU. And in this respect, we're again ready to put it and to translate it and to moderate it so that it is understood that we are not competitors, that we are indeed here to cooperate, and we have so many common interests based on the values. And I think that the description in Article 2 of the treaties is one description of values that is also shared by the United States. So this is something to work on, and there are very few other parts of the world which share the same values. Again, of the Article 2, it's just a list of values, but anyway, I really believe that it can serve as a certain basis, and nuances are there and will be there always, but the basis is also there.
Thank you. In summing up that part, I think that all of you will agree that this is an important area that should be part of our discourse, and that was the intent of my question, because in the report it's looking at our relationship and what are those issues that should be part of it. And I think I take away from what you've said that also I know there's a big debate about the reforms needed within the European Union, and at least I do take away from the three of you that that's not something that you certainly would differ with, that there are needs for reforms. The third area I wanted to address was security. But I'm going to summarize, if you don't mind, because I do want to give the time for the audience. But let me just say this. In your opening comments, I think all three of you had indicated the importance of the security relationship. Part of NATO, two of you mentioned in particular about the threat from Russia. You even mentioned China in your comments. But I think we're very united on that front, and that's an area that I think we can continue to collaborate on. So forgive me for summarizing that. I'm doing that succinctly because let's go to the audience. I know there must be a lot of questions. So let's get a mic here, and if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Anna Smith-Lacey, Hungary Initiatives Foundation. Religious freedom is an important principle in the United States. There's a reason why it's the First Amendment, not the 10th. It's important in Hungary. A 450-year-old edict was the first that granted religious freedom in Europe. In Poland in 1979, when John Paul gave his important sermon, the Polish people responded, not "we want wealth, we want God," as President Trump reminded everyone. And as the flag behind you is a witness, it's important in Slovakia as well. How does the new initiative, well, not new, but 2-year-old initiative of this administration and Secretary Pompeo's Religious Freedom Summit give a new avenue or new dimension, if any, for your foreign policy cooperation on this specific issue?
Okay, we'll answer that in a moment, but let's get Ambassador Vershval's question, because I think we have, and we'll come to you next. But
okay.
Go ahead, please.
Sandy Vershval at the Atlantic Council. The recent European Parliament elections seem to have left the Union divided, maybe more divided than before, on issues of deepening versus broadening, of supranational role for the European institutions versus sovereignty, which you have emphasized. V4 seems to have played a sort of outsized role compared to the past in shaping the outcome of the selection of European leaders. Is this, could this now become a kind of a role for the V4 or even a broader circle of Central European states to try to forge a middle course on these issues and resolve some of these divisions? Is this time for Central Europeans to step up and play a more leading role inside the Union?
Let's take these two questions and then we'll continue on. Minister, would you mind going first?
Thank you.
You have the religious
Yes.
freedom question and then the parliamentary elections. And if we'll rapidly go down the line.
Yeah, it will be very quick. So as I told you at the beginning, we have been a Christian country for 1,019 years, and we are proud of it. What we are not happy with is that Christianophobia seems to be the last acceptable form of discrimination. And this is something which is totally unacceptable for us. So whenever you want to speak in favor of the Christians, you are always warned to be careful and speak about religious minorities instead of the Christians. But come on, if I want to speak about the Christians, I speak about the Christians, and I mean it. And we have to understand that Christianity is the most persecuted religion all over the earth, as 80% of those men and women who are persecuted because of their religion are Christians. And we must not be shy to speak about that. And you know, whenever foreign ministers we come together and deal with the issues in the Middle East, and I raise my hand and say that please let's address the situation of the Christian communities, they always say, oh, you know, Peter, we have to be more careful, and you know, we have to put into consideration others and say religious minorities. But I mean, come on, if we Christians do not speak up in favor of the Christian communities in need in the world, who else will do so?
So you do think that the initiative
and that's why I
is a good
think that initiative was an excellent one. And when it comes to the Central European cooperation, you know, we made a lot of efforts in order to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. If you look at the growth rates of these countries, you will see that they're way above the European average. So we contribute to the success and the performance of the European Union. And why? Because these countries in Central Europe were brave enough to make the necessary decisions on the basis of common sense and rationality, to make structural reforms and be rational in economy and in security as well. We have the lowest tax rates of the European Union, and we are under attack. The French president has proposed in a very communist, very socialist way that there must be a tax harmonization and communizing the debts. But come on, this is spreading all over the impact of irresponsible national economic policies, which we totally disagree. So based on our brave approach, brave decisions, we became a factor, and we definitely do have an influence on the future of the European Union, because 4 of us are able to speak on the same, I wouldn't say language, because it is the same voice. Let's put it this way.
Let me also refer to these two questions. So first of all, when we are here as ministers, it means that for us, freedom of religion is very important, and indeed in our foreign policy, one of our goals. it happens that it is also important for the United States, but it's intrinsic, so to say, goal. Poland is currently a member of the Security Council of the United Nations. We initiated recently with a success a resolution of General Assembly to establish 22nd of August as a day of persons persecuted due to the religion or belief. So it will be the first time. It was our goal in the Security Council to defend that freedom, because it is the most important freedom. Other freedoms you can derive from that. So it is simply a similar approach to the perception of problems in the world. As far as ambassadors...
So you agree as well, it's a good idea?
It is a good idea, and even I would like to say more. I will speak tomorrow at the meeting ministerial. We will propose a continuation already. I will announce, because it's our program, we will chair the Security Council, preside over next month. 22nd of August, we will organize in the United Nations area formula debate on that issue. So not only that it's a good idea, it should be supported by other countries, and we would like to contribute to that in a cooperation with the United States and with other countries. Very important question concerning what happened after the election to the European Parliament and this new institutional, and this. I think it is very important what happened, and it is in accordance with our, so to say, perception of the European Union. First of all, the defeat of federalists' perception of the European Union in the form of not accepting these leading candidates, because it is a main federalist idea. So what happened? The governments decided, the countries, so the legitimacy of the European Union depends on states. So it was very important, with very important consequences in the future. So come back to this intergovernmental vision of the European Union. Second, Poland supported very strongly Ursula von der Leyen. And thanks to our support, Law and Justice Party, she simply got a confirmation yesterday in the European Parliament. It shows it was very close, that we are in this mainstream, and there is an opposition of the parties, different parties, particularly from left and from right, that were against that. I think Hungary was also for, yes, your party. So you see, for us it was very important to maintain this consensus, not to create crisis situations. We are portrayed as troublemakers, but indeed we want simply to maintain this consensus and strengthen the European Union institutions. So it's a positive example, I think.
Deputy Minister, do you think you could give a very quick answer? Because our next speaker, your colleague, is here, and if with his permission, we might take 2 more questions and close. But do you have a quick response to both of these questions?
I will be very short on religious freedom, for example, because we will have a discussion actually tomorrow at the conference, of course. But just one thing to flag: the freedom of religion has been established in Czech lands in 1790-ish by Joseph II. Since then, we consider it as a given, and to be honest, we are surprised, or not surprised, but we consider this as a serious issue, that we have to deal with the issue in 2019 still as a very relevant issue. But we will certainly talk about this tomorrow, and due to the time constraint, let me just very shortly comment on the discussion after the European elections. I think it is a very crucial one. I think that in principle, institution-wise, it was important to show that the leading candidate concept was not democratic one, but on the contrary, that it could have been detrimental to European democracy to a large extent. But at the same time, we have managed to let's say, get rid of the concept in letter. But we've seen, nevertheless, certain bigger cooperation between the European Parliament and the European Commission in the past. And we saw it also during the procedure of the vote of Ursula von der Leyen, and many concessions given to the European Parliament as of now. So it will be a challenge that was not done on the 2nd of July 2019. This would be a permanent process in which the member states will have to put their space actually into the debate, because there is indeed more cooperation and closer cooperation between the Commission and European Parliament, as an element and as a reaction maybe, not just the 2014 elections, but I guess I would even say to the Lisbon Treaty of 2009.
If with permission, I'm going to take the two questions. Yes, we wanted to pass you the mic earlier, and also over there. We're going to take those two, and we have to close. Please be very brief.
Okay, so I'm Alexandra
Who are you?
Wojtowicz from United Nations Association Poland, and I'd like to ask each of you actually about because each of you mentioned the importance of energy security. But on the other hand, at least for my knowledge, like Poland is really against the nuclear energy in Poland, building the nuclear energy factory, if that's the correct name. So I'd like to ask why so. And if I may ask the other question very briefly, basically the US foreign policy is highly dependent on the president. We never know, will he be Wilsonianist, will he be realist? So if each of the country would base their national security policy on the US, what is like the second way if the next president is not going to be Donald Trump, if his attitude is going to be different?
Thank you. Next one. Very briefly,
Hi,
please.
Annie Chikwadze, Voice of America, Georgian Service. Quick question. You talk about struggles and you talk about historical struggles that the countries went through. Do you today still see, after 30 years, Russia as a strategic threat to your country? Is a question. And secondly, to the Mr. Minister in... well, you were in Zakarpattia, in Transcarpathia yesterday. So what's the Hungary's goal there, if you could tell us?
Okay, and please be brief as a courtesy to your colleague. And so we're going to start at your end and just come forward. Please
okay, so I will pick off the questions, I mean, to some extent. On foreign policy, I think of the US, I think it is actually, when you look on the ground, it is a stable policy. It is involved in the global happenings. And I think it is in the interest of the United States to stay very present in Europe and elsewhere, because nobody else can do its role. And I think that this is happening when you look on the long-term trends and on the acts. Maybe the method has changed, but the substance has not. And I think that this will not change also with the next presidential election. On the economic struggle and on the threat from Russia, I consider that this is a strategic and security threat. In terms of economic ones, maybe less so, because also of the structural weakness of the Russian economy. But we have to deal with the overall repercussions. The Czech region doesn't neighbor actually any Eastern Partnership country, so we are looking at it more in distance. But what is important is to avoid the clear destabilization in the Eastern Partnership countries, which are led by Russia. This is our...
even mentioned it in your opening
Yes.
remarks. Minister, please, if you'd be brief.
As far as nuclear energy is concerned, so we think that it would be good to add this source of energy to our energy mix. We are dependent on coal. Indeed, during last visit of President Andrzej Duda in Washington, memorandum of understanding was signed on cooperation in nuclear energy sector with the United States. So we are thinking in the way to maybe introduce that source of energy. As far as Russia as a threat, I think it is perceived in our part of Europe as a threat. There is a proof of that. Russia aggression against Ukraine, against Georgia, and maybe not military threat, immediate one to Poland, but when you look at the Baltic states and when you look at in the perspective, it might be so in future. There is also influence, interference in internal politics, cyber threats. Only robust deterrence together with the United States and defense, if there is a need, may limit Russian aggressive policy.
Okay, thank you. And Minister, you get the final words.
Yeah. When it comes to energy, we are a pro-nuclear country, peaceful use. We are now building the second nuclear power plant of ours. It's interesting that the main constructor is Rosatom and the number one subcontractor is General Electric, so we are happy to give a platform for Russian-American economic cooperation. On the other hand, when it comes to the role of president when it comes to foreign policy, it's natural. And we feel the difference. Before this president had been elected, we were mostly lectured. And now we feel that the relationship is based on mutual respect. When it comes to Ukraine, we have 150,000 Hungarians living in the western part of Ukraine. We have a very clear expectation towards Ukraine to respect their rights and not to violate it. And I have to tell you that President Poroshenko carried out an anti-Hungarian policy, and unfortunately the rights of the Hungarian minority were violated. And now we really do hope that with the new president there's a new hope and we can rebuild the relationship with Ukraine in the future.
Ministers, thank you so much for your candidness and for your coming this afternoon. Please join me in thanking them.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Minister Jacek, who's up next. Thank you for giving us a little space over. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to hearing you.